Thank you. Just a chairman's prerogative. If you could turn the microphones up just a touch. Yeah, so I can hear others. I can't hear thunder, so thank you. I'd like to call the Executive and Governance Committee to order. It's the only committee that the law appoints, and it's the audit chair, vice chair, and chair. So we counting the votes should be fairly simple, Ms. Secretary, but your minutes are in your materials.
If we could, Chairman Smith, we need to call the roll.
Yeah, you better call the roll, even though I can see them. Go ahead.
Trustee DeLay.
Present.
Trustee Freeman.
Present.
Trustee Smith.
Present.
You have a quorum.
That's good. If anybody would, you guys look at the minutes, and I'd love a motion to approve.
So moved. Second. Thank you.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. That looks like unanimous. We have, before we go to the parliamentary rules, I'd like to report that as your chairman, I just completed the president's annual evaluation in accordance with our rules. And I sent a copy of the president's self-assessment to each board member. I did that with U.S. mail just because I'm paranoid about hitting the forward button. So forgive me for that, but that's something that I did on purpose. I met with Dr. McPhee and discussed his self-evaluation along with your comments and suggestions. I sent out a second goal, asked Pat to send our potential goals and aspirational goals, which were good, and I thought maybe weren't quite up to snuff on our first due, but have. In summary, the institution's had a super year. The COVID-19 challenges we faced over the past 12 to 18 months, let's hope is a once-in-a-lifetime event for all of us here. Some of the highlights, of course, ranking by Princeton Review, increased enrollment and successful reopening, which is monumental. I'm not sure that history books will really reflect how, what a task that was and a great goal that the president set and did. We've discussed several long and short-term goals. He's the CEO, and Dr. McPhee has performed well. Excellent job. And I provided the president with a written assessment of his performance record, so to be in line with all the duties of the chairman. So with that said, Jeff, would you go to the parliamentary procedures?
Mr. Chairman, just before Jeff makes his presentation, this item is a result of a request by one of our trustees to review the parliamentary rules, the process, and kind of a refresher for the trustees. So I've asked Jeff to our General Counsel and Interim Secretary of the Board to put together a brief presentation for you all.
And Dr. McPhee, I own up to that. I'm the trustee as for the update, so appreciate you indulging me, and Jeff, appreciate you teaching me. So thank you.
Well, it's been a great learning opportunity for me because, believe it or not, this is not a class that I took in law school, and I have not dealt with parliamentary rules at all until, frankly, the past few days getting ready for this very presentation. So, first I want to talk about bylaws versus the procedural rules, because our bylaws, the board's bylaws, are going to kind of set the baseline here. And so there are meeting procedures that are set in the bylaws that'll be followed. And then if it's not specifically addressed by the bylaws or the policies, well, then the bylaws say to consult and follow general parliamentary rules. So the first thing I wanted to talk about quickly was the agenda. The bylaws say the agenda is prepared by the secretary in consultation with the chair and the president, and shall list each matter to be considered at the meeting. If an item is not on the Board of Trustees agenda, there's a procedure in the bylaws to amend the agenda to add that item. And then the bylaws also specify the preference that agenda items for the Board of Trustees come through the committee structure. So it says, after consulting with committee chairs, the president, the secretary, and the chair may designate items for deliberation at the full board meeting if those items haven't been reviewed by or recommended by a committee. So short of the committee structure, it comes through the chair to add to the agenda. The next thing I wanted to bring.
Hey, Jeff, I got a question for you.
Yes,
so
sir.
Does that mean that if you want something to come before the board, you go through the chair with your recommendation, with your ask?
It would go through the committee structure, which the board chair, the president, and the secretary to the board assemble those committee agendas. So it would go through the committee structure. There is a procedure, though, in the bylaws where items not considered at the committee can jump straight to the board and be included on the board's agenda, but only
If the board,
after consulting with the chair of the committee that's getting bypassed, the president, the secretary, and then the chair of the board may
Okay.
designate an item to bypass.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So is that, Jeff, is that the same thing for amendments to a published agenda? So,
No, that's different. So this is, when we're talking about this, we're at the stage where the agenda for the Board
being
of
developed.
Trustees meeting is being developed.
okay,
And normally that agenda is developed by
By the
looking at what was on the
Okay.
committee agendas. However, during that development phase, the chair can add an item that wasn't considered by the committees. The amendment to the agenda would come during the meeting
okay.
itself.
And you're going to go through what that process will
Yes,
be?
I will.
Okay.
So briefly, just to talk about motions, subject to what we said about an item being on the agenda, the item would need to be on the agenda, and then anyone can make the motion. It's important, and we talked about this a moment ago, I don't even remember whose motion it was, but to state precisely what the motion is, follow the procedures if you're going to amend the motion, but to be very precise in the wording of the motion. It's the secretary's job, this is coming from Robert's Rules of Order, it's the secretary's job to copy the motions down accurately, not to come up with the language he or she thinks is what the group or the mover meant. The chair can require that motions be submitted in writing, and Robert's Rules also recommends that long, complex motions be pre-submitted to the secretary in writing just to facilitate quality procedures and quality minutes after the fact. Before the motion can be considered, it needs to be seconded. Obviously, seconding the motion does not show agreement with the motion, just opens the item up for debate. Robert's Rules would say that after the motion and the second, the chair would repeat the exact words of the motion and explain the rules for a vote. Majority vote versus two-thirds vote, voice vote versus roll call vote.
Are there within the bylaws or within the, any other guidances about what needs more than a majority vote?
Yeah, the bylaws specify that more than a majority vote is required for change amendments to the bylaws or where otherwise required by law.
but add
then
on to
also
her
there's-
question, what would require more than a majority?
Amendment to the bylaws
You
requires.
want to change the
two-thirds vote.
bylaws.
Well, I know it, but what would require more than the majority? What would require, I didn't read anywhere about a two-thirds.
There, if you want to amend the bylaws say that if you want to amend the bylaws, that requires a two-thirds vote, a proposed amendment, addition to, deletion from the bylaws. And then it also says where required by law, and frankly, I'm not sure of a spot where law requires a two-thirds vote. There probably is one that we haven't encountered yet, but, and then also, and we're talking mostly about main motions now too. There are also secondary motions. So you've got a main motion to take action, then there are secondary motions that could affect the main motion. And there are some secondary motions that would require a 2/3 vote, such as a motion for previous question or a motion to object to the consideration of a matter would both be two examples of things that would require a 2/3 vote.
Jeff, I think one of the interesting things that you said just now is when you second a motion, you're not necessarily saying you agree with the motion. What you're saying is, let's have some I'll second it so that we can have some discussion about it, right? So you're not saying, when Pete made this motion to set the graduation rates, not necessarily that I agreed with it, but I wanted to second it so that we could have more discussion about it. Now, the motion may not go anywhere, but the seconding process is just for this body to have some conversation about it. It may not go anywhere, but it's the process of just putting it out there for us to have discussion about it. Is that correct?
That is what, yes, that's precisely what Robert's Rules says.
Thank you.
And so then after the motion and the second is when the debate should occur. Strictly speaking, there should be no debate on the matter until there has been a motion and a second. Only one main motion can be pending at a time. That's why we made the amendment a minute earlier, or we've made motions to postpone before. Secondary motions are appropriate during debate. Those could be a motion to amend the main motion, a motion to recess, or a motion to postpone. Those have to be resolved before returning back to the substantive vote on the main motion.
And those secondary motions, you said, need to be 2/3?
Some secondary motions need to be 2/3, but not all of them.
I can give
Hang
you,
on.
I can give you,
grab my list over here. I've got a cheat sheet that.
while he's walking, if you want to call the previous question, if you want to change to a ballot vote, that takes 2/3 vote. If you want to close nominations, if you're in the nominating process, that takes 2/3 votes. Or if you want to suspend the rules, that takes a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, I've got a slightly different list that extend time, object to consideration of a matter, consider something out of its scheduled order, and then obviously call the question is also 2/3, I
Got it.
think. But all the others, such as the motion to amend that we had earlier, were
Majority
were
only.
majority. So after debate, debate ends when, I guess there's a natural end to the discussion and the chair asks, are you ready for the question? Any further debate? That naturally ends the debate. Chair would then repeat the exact wording of the motion. Vote would be taken. Debate can also end on a motion for previous question. It would close the debate immediately and also prevent secondary motions. It can be made at any time provided that the movement has the floor. They need to be recognized by the chair to get the floor, and it requires a 2/3 vote and is undebatable. And then lastly would be preventing debate or ending debate preventing debate would be objection to the consideration of a matter. Objection would be raised before the discussion begins. Also undebatable also requires a 2/3 vote. The last thing I wanted to touch on were minutes. The bylaws recognize that they're not to be a verbatim record, but should provide an adequate basis to determine which actions were taken or which permanent policies have been enacted. Robert's Rules says essentially says only record what was done, not everything that was said. So they're not intended to be a transcript. Also, the Open Meetings Act has some provisions about minutes, and normally we think of the Open Meetings Act as the authority that prohibits private deliberations, but as it relates to minutes, it also says the minutes under the Open Meetings Act have to include the persons present, all motions that were made, proposals and resolutions offered, results of any votes, and a record of individual votes in the event of a roll call vote. So, you kind of synthesize all those together and you end up with essentially pure discussion or informational items, as we've noted on the agenda, are not required to be summarized or discussed at length in the minutes, will be noted but not necessarily summarized. For deliberations on Board of Trustees action, so action items, debate won't be recorded verbatim, but major points raised during the debate would be noted, and the outcome, obviously, the motions, the votes, who made the motions, who made the second, those would also be recorded in the minutes.
I think, in this, I don't know if this is accurate, but if a Board of Trustees says, I would like for this to be in the minutes, then I think that it'll be automatically put in the minutes.
I don't think that, and I'd have to go back and
Okay,
check
that's fine.
Robert's rules
Yeah.
on that, but I'm not sure that that's,
Okay.
a specific request is permitted in there, but I can double check
Yeah,
that.
you can check on that for me. Had that happen to me at another board meeting.
Anybody have questions?
So can we go back to amending the agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Where,
So here's my understanding. So the agenda is delivered, and I have a question about how far in advance of a meeting should an agenda be presented to either the full Board of Trustees or to members of a particular committee? Because I'm assuming that these parliamentary rules apply not just at the board level, but also at the committee level.
you know, a lot of the rules as specified in the board bylaws, to the extent I was talking about those only technically apply to board meetings. And they would not technically apply to committee
Committees.
meetings, I don't think. There may be one or two spots where it says during all board and committee meetings, but by and large, the bylaws are referencing board meetings. That doesn't mean it's not still a good practice to do at the committee level
Yeah.
as well. But their state law, the Open Meetings Act, requires 7 days notice in advance of the meetings. Technically, it requires reasonable notice in advance of the meeting, which has been interpreted to be 7 days.
So, but does that mean notice of the meeting includes a full agenda, or does it merely say that the Board of Trustees is going to meet?
I think it doesn't specifically say either way. I would, depending on which position I needed to take as an attorney, I could probably argue either side of it.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, I think to a certain extent, it's probably a practice that this board needs to establish so that there's clarity around what do we mean when we're saying it's notice of a meeting. And, you know, if I can just put my personal preference out there, which is not necessarily the right answer, is my experience has been best practice is you provide an agenda at a minimum a week ahead of time so that the full board has a sense of what's going to be presented, and then also the timing that's going to be required to invest in the actual meeting. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think normally, and, you know, Pat's always crawling all over me to get agendas and materials to her a couple of weeks ahead of time so that we can do just that and actually go even beyond that and have the agenda, all the materials, everything out at the same time. And in this instance, actually, the agenda and everything went out before
Right.
the meeting notice was actually even published to the university or to the media. So
Which then gets me back to the amending the agenda question.
amending the agenda question is, so this is in the, it's in the bylaws. Matters not appearing on the agenda of a stated meeting may be considered upon an affirmative vote of the majority of those present and voting. So an item needs to be, or is wanted to be on the agenda, desired to be on the agenda, come to the meeting, it's not on the agenda. There is the procedure there to add it to the agenda with a majority vote. Obviously, that addition could only take place at the meeting
Right,
itself, because
right.
that's the only place where you have folks available.
So Jeff, I think you said there's 3 ways that an item can get on the agenda. It can come up through the committee, come up through the committee, and then another way is through the chair, and then another way is get an amendment and the board votes on it, and it gets to be placed on the agenda. So there's 3 ways to get on the agenda. Historically, I've only been on the agenda once, and I sent a note to the chair who said, hey, you got your notice in time. And once we got to the meeting, he went through the proper procedure and got me on the agenda. And so that's a proper way to get on the
Well,
agenda.
but let me ask a question about that. That's a
Yeah.
really interesting point, Daryl. Here's the question. If it comes up through the chair, what I thought I heard Jeff say was that if there is a a committee chair that's being overstepped, that one of the processes needs to be that you also check with that particular committee chair, who is then consulted by the board chair.
Yeah. I wasn't overstepping a committee.
Is that right?
That's
Jeff?
right. That's
Okay, so there's an interim step there. So I think this is why it's really important for us to sort of, as a
But
board.
I think that's method number 2. Method number 3 is
Amend, yes.
amend. That's
Yes.
the method I used
yeah. And
to get on the agenda, because we voted on it
Well,
once.
then I misheard you, because I thought you said that you had talked to the board chair, and you and the
he-
board chair
and
agreed, which is not,
and the board chair told me, he says, Darrell, if you want to be on the agenda, send your notice to me. And so that's what I did.
yeah, but
But I didn't, nobody said, talk to the committee chair.
right, and I think that's why we're doing this, because I
Yep.
think we have to be clear about the process, about how we operate under parliamentary procedure and under the bylaws.
Yep.
So I think for me, it's a really good, not just a refresher, but it's a learning experience as to how we need to operate. So I think there's a lot of benefit here to get this clarity, so that we don't have these questions about, did we do this right? And we have this internal debate during the course of a board meeting. So this is really very helpful.
And if I can add to that, just very briefly, the issues that we're studying and voting on and deciding about are very complex, and they require a lot of background material reading, especially. So I'm with you when you say 7 days for sure, get all the materials out that you can get, even if you have to add more materials, simply because of the reading volume that we need to have. And agendas should be carefully amended, because there are too many legal authorities all around us watching what we do for various and sundry little details, so that more observation and less ad hoc on the fly we do, the better off we're going to be, and we're going to stay out of trouble if we've had all due consideration 99% of the time. I mean, we have to leave ad hoc open, but it's you can get into a lot of trouble just saying, oh, let's just stop everything and look at this instead.
Well, but I think that belongs also to the board. If it's an amendment sort of on the fly at a board meeting, I think that's the kind of conversation that you need to have at the board meeting to say, wait a minute, this is an important topic. It deserves more than simply an on-the-fly discussion. Let's table it now. We're not going to vote in favor, but we do want to have this conversation. Let's schedule it for.
We need the background material, we need to read through it, even if we need to call a special meeting.
There's a timing issue that you brought up. On the last meeting, we had a person request to appear before the committee. We're going to propose rules to clarify that, but we sent the agenda out several days prior to what the bylaw said you had to ask for. So let's just say the agenda went out 14 days. There was a 10-day notice, so it wasn't time to put on the agenda. You with me?
Yep.
We sent the agenda out too soon.
Well, we really did.
Yeah, we sent the agenda out too soon.
And on the rules that are proposed, you would send your information and your request, the information you're going to present. You correct me, please. Well, sometimes I don't want to be. You submit the information or whatever handout you might have and your request at the same time, 7 days prior to the meeting, so that I'm guessing the agenda would get electronically to you on 7 days prior, but U.S. mail, it might be 6 days. You with me? Because I don't think we should send the agenda out before the deadline to get on the agenda has passed.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion about how we want to operate, and I think that's fine. Now, a question I've got for Jeff is, can you do not a final agenda, but can you position something 14 days out in advance of the 7-day sort of notice thing? This is a draft agenda.
Yep.
asking for sort of reaction from the Board of Trustees.
Well, and one of the things as I was, and I don't know if I'm skipping ahead or staying behind, because I think this particular policy is coming up in a couple of more items down the agenda.
Yeah, I saw that.
But as I was discussing this very issue with the VPs while drafting that policy, the timing issue is real. And this is for public comment or public addresses to the board. We had the student that came for the last meeting, and so I think the way we decided might be the best way to address it would be when we publish the regular agenda 14 days before, when Pat tells me I have to have it to it, we include as an agenda item, request to address the board, parentheses, if any. And then we leave it at that. And then once the meeting comes around, 7 days before, or the day of the meeting, if there have been any requests to address the board, they would just slide right into that agenda item. And it wouldn't then require a motion to amend the agenda like we had to do for the student last time. There would be an agenda item there for them. It just may be an agenda item that we ultimately didn't need and we would just move past if we got no request to address the board.
I think this is great clarification, and probably will never happen again. I don't think we've had but one agenda item change since we started in 3 years. I don't think.
The parents that came and spoke with us, I think they followed, I don't know if it was on the agenda when it was
Yeah.
sent out or not.
But I think it's only happened once or twice.
Right.
But it's good clarification because I was confused the last time I was in the board meeting.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
why we had this
Yeah.
conversation at the last
So, yeah.
board meeting. It was, let's
So-
get some,
But I don't think it's going to happen anymore. But it's good to know what
Structure.
the rules are. Yeah.
I got to be honest with you, Jeff, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with just having a standing agenda item for, and obviously that may or may not be the right answer, I don't know. It's just my gut tells me that if you put something out there that is just sort of a placeholder, for lack of a better term,
You invite.
it just doesn't strike me as being as disciplined as we need to be about putting together an agenda. And again, that's personal reaction.
Well-
I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way.
Trustee Coiba, I agree with you, actually,
agree.
and I wanted to have a conversation with you all about that. I fully agree with you
Well,
on that.
It might be
Perhaps
possible
we
to-
could,
to
excuse me.
generally, it might be possible generally to say, we're going to send out a firm agenda on the 14 days in advance with a possibility of amendment up to 7 days in advance.
If you stamp it
with the right
draft,
process.
perhaps, you're the lawyer, but if you stamp,
I'm a recovering lawyer, by the way.
I'm sorry?
I'm a recovering.
Well, if you stamp it draft, and then if there is one at 7 days, I'd like, if it's not in this, I want the information that the presenter is proposing to present 7 days as well, so that I might digest it, not
Right.
get hit with something.
Right. No, I think that was Mary's point
Yeah.
as well, is it's great, you need the agenda, obviously, for any number of reasons, but you also need the materials so that you can do your fiduciary duty in terms of evaluating the topic and to come prepared to have that conversation. You can't just get it dumped on you, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, at the meeting. So I think.
Yeah.
Anything that's an action item should have.
Jeff,
its supporting materials.
actually, we are bleeding into, no, that's not a good word, we are moving into two of these items that, for consideration.
Why don't we
I think
let
need-
Jeff finish,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
at
because-
the end, if there's more conversation,
Yeah, there's
we'll
Most
have
of those questions are going to be answered, or could we really get into that?
And I've finished what I had to discuss about general parliamentary rules, but happy to answer any other
Move on to the
questions.
All right,
I think there's somebody between me and
There is
my next round on the agenda.
proposed
I will-
policy revision of the board committees. Mary?
And then it's the last one.
Good afternoon. This agenda item is an action item concerning revisions to the board's policy on committees, and specifically this committee, the Executive and Governance Committee. Our institutional accreditor, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, requires in Standard 4.2.g, that a governing board defines and regularly evaluates its responsibilities and expectations. The Commission's goal is that a governing board uses self-evaluation for continuous improvement in meeting its responsibilities and expectations. The university must be able to explain how the MTSU Board of Trustees meets this standard, supported by evidence. And that evidence should include the board's policy and procedures, its schedule for self-evaluation, the results of those self-evaluations, and minutes of meetings that reflect discussions about self-evaluation procedures, the results, and the actions taken in response to self-evaluation. Currently, the MTSU Board of Trustees and the Executive and Governance Committee is largely in compliance with SAC-COC Standard 4.2G. The board's policy on committees assigns multiple oversight and compliance tasks to the Executive and Governance Committee. This committee has already led the board in 2 rounds of self-evaluation. However, the board's policy on committees does not require the Executive and Governance Committee to adopt a procedure for regular self-evaluation that will demonstrate the board's efforts at continuous improvement. Thus, if you look at page 11, you'll see the red line version there suggests the inclusion of a new 11.4. This will clarify that the Executive and Governance Committee has responsibility for a regular schedule of board self-evaluation and the use of evaluation results for improvement. And I'm glad to take any questions you might have.
If there are no, go ahead.
This may be getting a little too far in the weeds, but on the corporate boards I serve on, the evaluation process is a lot more thorough of the CEO, a lot more thorough of the board, a bunch more questions that you can get answers to and make sure that everybody's evaluating on the same thing. And so I'm just putting it out there. It's not just how do you think John is doing? But it's a lot more questions. And I think there's some compensation evaluation firms that we could use, Chairman, that could help us in that area if we wanted to make improvements in that area.
Sorry, are you speaking about
So there's board evaluations.
evaluation, or are you speaking
There's
about
both.
personnel?
Both. No, I'm talking about board evaluation of ourselves. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
So the evaluation isn't, how do you think Trustee Koboyak is doing?
Right.
But there's some questions that the board comes up with that we all grade each other on, and then share that data, and then also some questions that we all have for the evaluation of our CEO. But just making it a more formal process, if you will, other than just hey, how do you think Pete's doing?
Well, as you know, we sent out it's probably not SurveyMonkey, but we sent out SurveyMonkey. What I'd suggest,
Which may work, Steve.
well, what I'd suggest is take the last one, and why don't we have questions at the next committee of this group?
Back when this board was being formulated and we were setting up policies and so forth, the group of people that came in and trained us for a little bit of time at the Faculty Senate and so forth, they had a standardized survey. There were several others that are free online. We could take 2 or 3 of these, merge them into something, and that would be a starting place, and then we could fine-tune it.
Yeah.
Well, at our next meeting, if you had, would you, Mr. President, would you send out everybody, to everyone on the board, the evaluation we used last time? And we'll bring that with us, and any suggestions you have for changes, that's what we'll do.
And if I could speak to that a little bit, I think that's what the proposed revision has in mind, is that you would set up a regular procedure now that would begin with going back and looking at the survey instrument, which, from what I've seen, it had a series of statements, and you ranked the board, you assessed the board from strongly agree to strongly disagree, and then it had open-ended questions. So you would come back and look at that, say, okay, well, what were the results? What did we do? Did we see the improvement of the board that we wanted? Do we think we need to change our survey instrument? And then that would be what you administered to yourselves, and then you'd come back and discuss the results. And some institutions, regularly publish the results of board self-evaluations so that then they can be the basis of discussion about action steps for improvement. And then that sets you up for what we call in the assessment world, closing the loop, where you go back and say, okay, what have we achieved?
Yes.
And where do we need to go from here? And I think that's what I hear all of you saying.
That's what I'm accustomed
Yes.
to in corporate America.
So Jeff, a question for you. I'm assuming that any evaluation that's conducted by the board becomes a record of the board and is then subject to just basically everybody taking a look at it, right? This is not a confidential document in the sense of Open Meetings Act requirements?
Well, I know that evaluations of individual employees are confidential
Right,
and are not
right, but
subject
this
to
is
the
the
public
board.
record Act. Yes, I believe that I will have to double check and get back with you, but I believe that this would be a public document because ultimately it's going to be something that we're sharing with our accreditor.
Sure.
So it would,
Yeah.
it would defeat its purpose if
Yeah.
it wasn't a public document.
So Mary, you need a motion
I need a motion.
to
So moved.
amend the policy so that
Correct.
we can go through that process. Is that right?
So moved. And I think, so, I made a
Make a
motion.
motion and talk. Wait.
I know, I'm going to wait. He just went over that.
Second.
Now you can talk.
Now discussion.
Yeah, but I think it sets us up very well with our accrediting agency to know that we've gone through this process as opposed to just a one-liner. And so I think this, for us, it helps the university and it helps, again, with our accreditation.
Yes, it does. And just one last word here to say that it does help us with our accreditor. But I want to make clear, you have been evaluating yourselves. What we're doing here is establishing a formal process required by your committee charge for doing this. And yes, what SAC COC expects is something more, and they even say this in the resource manual, something more than a statement that the board evaluated itself. They want evidence. And they want that evidence of continuous improvement.
Yes.
And I understand that for SACs. Just a question, and one thing you don't see in corporate boards that we're talking about here, this being a public document. So, for example, in corporate America, those kind of things are not public documents. So the competitor of Bridgestone doesn't read Bridgestone's board's evaluation. We have competitive schools. Should this be a public document? I mean, I understand the SACs. I understand SACs is our accrediting agency. But a board evaluation that's a public document for every other entity in the state of Tennessee to observe, is that exactly what we're saying we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and I wasn't asking the question to be pro or con on either side of it, Pete. It was just a matter of, I just want to understand what it is that's expected under the charter that put us together as a group and the laws that are outstanding at this point. So I think.
Chris, I don't think
I
it
agree
is
with you.
expected. I mean, or it would have been in. It's something we did because it's
No.
an obvious thing we should do.
No, absolutely. I get, the question is whether or not it's public, to Pete's point, or whether it is something that is really a proprietary document that shouldn't be public because of the nature of the evaluation and sort of the kind of communication that.
I would side on that, and the reason I would side on that is this in many ways is similar to a personnel evaluation. We're required to evaluate certain personnel, but we do not make that public to the whole world. And in this scenario, it's certainly a good practice, and it's certainly important to SACs. But by being a public document, I'm not sure that's what we're trying to achieve, given who all the different constituencies could be who would.
Well, as I sit here today anyway, that I know there is a statutory exemption to the Public Records Act that makes employee personnel evaluations confidential. Right now, I'm not aware of a parallel exemption for an entity's own evaluations, but I'll look at it and see if there is, and see whether it's public or not. If there's not a public records exemption that covers it, though, then it would be a public record, absent a carve-out.
Might
Absolutely.
determine how detailed questions are if it's public.
I'm certainly wanting us to be in compliance. I'm on other boards, both corporate boards and not-for-profit boards, and I know of none. Many evaluate the boards. I know of none that publish the evaluation of the board to non-interested parties or disinterested parties or people perhaps with a different.
So Jeff, would this be the kind of a question that if it's not clear-cut, that would be presented to, for example, Mr. Slattery for
The AG's
evaluation?
office, Attorney General.
Yeah.
Yes, if I don't find a clear-cut answer, I would contact probably not General Slattery himself, but my contact
Right.
at the AG's office.
We
One
will
of the
look into
easy-
that and get back with you as to
Should we
flexibility in
postpone the
there.
vote on this until after we hear that? or-
The-
No,
No, I don't
that
think,
this-
if I can just make a comment to that, I think that we're doing this already. The point that was made earlier was a very good one, which is we're doing it already. What this is doing is formalizing the fact that this is an obligation and a requirement of this particular committee. So I would suggest that regardless of what the outcome is, this is something that we need to be doing. And then it just becomes a question of how this is structured going forward. I think it's broad enough, the way it's written, that we have a lot of leeway in how we define and evaluate ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
So I'll
and
call
that's
for the
correct, yeah.
question, being the chair and one of the three committee members. All in favor of this document with the red line as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So, thank you.
the final one is that policy that,
The next one is Jeff talking about the policies we've been talking about.
I think this is the longest I've gone without eating.
Well, it probably won't hurt you.
Okay, so as we've already kind of touched on, the board bylaws permit anyone wishing to address the board to submit a written request 7 days beforehand. We had this written request come up at the board meeting back in April, and several trustees expressed that the board needed procedures for considering and fulfilling such requests. So that proposed new board policy request to address the Board of Trustees begins at page 21 of your materials, and it sets forth the procedure for such request, how to make them, when they'll be responded to, permissible subjects for the address to the board, time allocation for speakers, and other matters. To jump right in on the questions that we've already had about the 7-day trigger here, and that 7 days is in the bylaws. So absent an amendment to the bylaws, we're stuck with the 7-day advance notice required to address the board, which, as we've already talked about, that doubles up with, actually that is after where we've been trying to get the agendas out. So we've been endeavoring to get the agendas out, 10 to 14-ish days ahead of time, and then after that agenda's been published, the bylaws would allow this request to come in. We've handled it in the past, as was discussed earlier, with a motion to amend the agenda at the board meeting itself when the request has come in and been approved. That's one means of handling it. Another, which I don't think has gained much favor, is to have the placeholder request to address the board in the agenda, which you may just move past. But that is the challenge, is you've got the irreconcilable, basically, timeline between publication of the agenda,
Unless you amend the bylaws.
unless you amend the bylaws.
And my understanding, based on the education you've provided us today, is that that would require 2/3 vote of this body.
That's correct.
So it's not unamendable. It's just a
isn't.
matter of, do we see this 7-day, at least, language, a constraint? And from my perspective, it's difficult, because if you really do want to get a firm agenda out, 7 days gets you right when you have to give your notice. It's not a, and I don't think this issue came up when we were looking at bylaws and we as a board were identifying issues. So, I mean, it's not irreparable.
Right, absolutely. And I'll fold in, there's one other additional complication that I didn't even mention, is that the request has to come in for 7 days. The approval to be or not to be on the agenda isn't until 3 days before the board meeting. So we're really,
Up against.
yeah.
So one thing that maybe needs to be deliberated is, by the appropriate committee, is whether or not we want to take a look, or the board wants to be presented with an opportunity to amend the bylaws to address this time constraint issue.
Well, let's think how to do that. One, we could ask for an amendment prior to this. Or two, I mean, there's 1,000 ways, but two I'm thinking is we pass this and then amend the bylaws to 10. I guess you'd have to come back and change this then. What's
When we
the
amended the
what's the
bylaws-
logical progression to get, is 10 days what you propose?
Yeah, I was thinking that at least that way, first of all, it gives more than 7 days, and it gives you that 3-day cushion to 7. Now, I don't know if that's the right number. Again, I'm not smart enough to know what, from a practical perspective, it does for the secretary's office in terms of being able to put materials together. And I think that's why maybe the suggestion would be to kind of think through this timeline thing and what would make sense for the chair and what would make sense for the people who have to create the materials and the agenda and stuff.
My recommendation, just first blush, is that we look at this and pass this, and so that we won't be putting these things off another 2 board meetings. I mean, right now, anybody that comes asked to be on the agenda 7 days before, I think has to be, and he or she doesn't have to give materials or anything else, they just show up, and you get blindsided. If we have this, then you have a skeleton or a structure, and then leave it wide open for the next meeting to change it to coincide with 10. I don't think we ought to let the perfect take over from the good in this. I'm not trying to rush this through, but by the same token, I'd like for there to be some system to screen the board from showing up with obscene materials or materials that, and you don't know what the subject is. So there's no preparation, there's no anything. But I'll rest on that.
I have 2 comments that I would like to throw out in addition, besides the timing issue. I think we need, in the section 3, the end of the first sentence on page 21, individuals may speak about items on the board meeting agenda or other issues of concern to the board. I think we should amend of concern to the board to being something along the lines of germane to the responsibilities of the board. We're all concerned about a lot of things we don't have responsibility for. And this is not the place to discuss our concerns. It's a place to hear about things that we can do something about.
We're a governing board, not a debating society.
So
I agree with what you're
I would make an amendment to some language that said, issues germane to the responsibilities of the board.
Mr. Secretary, will you make a note on that in case we have a motion at some point? We talk about business, so I'd like to copy the best board chairman I've ever had. And won't we go to, do you have any other things you said?
I had one other
Okay.
comment, and I don't know if this would go in the bylaws, Jeff, or if this would be in a policy, or if it's just a general introductory statement. But I think something along the lines that speaking to the board is a privilege and not a guaranteed right would be important to say. In other words, just because someone wants to come up and talk to us, that I don't think we have that kind of open door policy for higher education boards in general, and I think that takes us way out of how we're interpreting our current policy is taking us out of the realm of the norm.
Unfortunately, that puts all the pressure on the chairman and the president to determine, and we are in, free speech is part, so.
Two things.
I hear you. Let's
sorry.
do this. Why don't we do this? Delaney, do you have anything you'd like to add to this discussion? You're not required to, for heaven's sakes, but like I say, the most effective board leader I've ever served with went around the room and asked, did they have anything? So if you feel comfortable, you got anything?
If anything, I would just second, I think the dates need to be clarified. As the 10-day, that sounds good to me, but other than that, this looks good to me.
Chairman Wright?
I would be inclined to move forward today with the decision and then make the amendment or change it in the future, as you mentioned. And then I had one other question that I didn't ask when we talk about whether or not the information will be public and published. I'd like at some point clarification on if it becomes public information, then is our individual comments public, or is it compiled data only that's public? Because I think that would be important for all of us to know before we answer surveys.
Dr. Baker?
I just want to know who's going to law and order this as the parliamentarian for all this new world we're creating.
Well, the chair's going to have to handle that, but
Okay.
the leaning on the secretary for heavy advice.
Well, I just simply, it's fine, but I just caution us a little bit to getting too far, too deep, and I do agree with Pete's comments about this not being in public domain.
Tom?
Two questions. One, does this just address board meetings, or does it address committee meetings as well?
It's only board meetings. The opportunity for the public to address the board is only at board meetings, not at committee meetings.
Okay, and when we say members of the public, let's say I'll pick on Mary. Mary wants to come and do a 5-minute presentation on higher math. Is she a member of the public, or is she a board member, and it's a different policy for her as a board member versus a member of the public?
Yeah, and this is a discussion Dr. McPhee and I had for a while, and I think that if a board member is wanting to advance the business of the board, make a motion, have an action item, so to speak, that would need to be done in their board capacity using the 3 agenda protocols that we talked about earlier. But Dr. Martin is also still a private citizen, and so she can remove her board hat if she would like, come to the podium and make a presentation upon giving the appropriate advance notice. But that would then be subject to all the limitations in the draft policy, which would include you can't make a motion or request action on the basis of that item.
Thank you.
Or would it preclude her from going back to her seat and making a motion?
Well, it would depend on whether that item was on the agenda through any of the 3 agenda.
That's the right answer. That's a good answer. Dr. DeLay?
I agreed with Mary's comments that there are certain things that are not purview of the board, and we're not a debating society, we're a governing board. So I think being germane to the functioning of the board is a good edit.
Dr. McPhee?
We've discussed this, and I think what you've heard from our General Counsel, Secretary of the Board is what we have put forth.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I think, Chairman, we go with what we have now and then make some adjustments. But do remind us that we are a public institution, and we serve at the will of our government. And so coming before this board is a right if you're a taxpayer. It's not a privilege. You deserve if you put in your notice, it's your right to come. It's not. So I just want to remind us that we are a part of a public organization that takes taxpayer dollars. And so just be reminded of that. But all that said, Mr. Chairman, I'll follow your lead on this, and if you need me to make a motion, I will.
Joey?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I can support it, but I would like Mary's comment. I would like to change the wording to Mary's.
So Darrell has made a motion, including, because there's just three of us. Darrell's made a motion that includes Mary's language, that one line change. We can't change the 10 days because that requires a bylaw change. So like I say, this is not perfect, but good. So, Mr. Secretary, would you read the motion to us?
The motion would be to approve the policy as drafted with the revision to sentence 1 of section 3 to delete the words "of concern to the board" and replace that with "germane to the responsibility of the board," period.
Do you accept that?
I would, yes, sir. I would second the motion.
Second. All-
Thank you, Pete.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's a unanimous pass. I believe that concludes our agenda today. Chairman's responsibility is to have a timely, and I'm a little late, and I apologize, but we've gone over a lot of stuff. I want to say what a privilege it is to be chairman, how much I appreciate the interaction I have with Dr. McPhee and the administration, sometimes on a more than daily basis. I'm worth what you're paying for. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, two
Yes, sir.
things. A, we need to say our graces for Joey's recovery and his good health. B, Andrew, you need to listen to this. Christine, would you please give us a 2-minute recap of your honor among your peers, please?
Thank you, JB, for embarrassing me in front of God and everyone.
It's all right.
But I was recently recognized by the government of Japan with a recognition which comes from the emperor, which is the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold Rays, and Rosette. And it was presented in recognition of helping build better relationships between the state of Tennessee and the government of Japan, primarily through the Japan-America Society and some other work that I've done with respect to Japanese related business.
Congratulations.
Excellent.
No, the presentation was actually made at the Consul General's residence before all the mask mandates and everything else were removed. So it was a very small conferment ceremony, but very meaningful and very emotional nonetheless.
Thank you. Great job. Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I got.
We're adjourned, but you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. I wanted to get an update from Dr. McPhee on, we had some graffiti on campus where somebody wrote "kill all NIGGERS" and wanted to know what's going on with that process. For the record, I did contact Dr. McPhee and ask him what was said, and he told me what was said, that "kill all N-words," and that disturbed me. And it also, I wanted to know, what we were going to do about that, and if we were going to alert African Americans on campus to let them know that somebody had written that. And I just know that if my kids were on this campus, I would want to know that somebody said that. If somebody said kill all the baseball team, we would at least call the baseball team and say, hey, this is what's being said. And so I was just wanting to follow up to see where we were with that, Dr. McPhee. Appreciate you, sir.
Yes, I've actually sent out 2 updates, one just maybe 3 or 4 days ago about this. We have threats all the time at the university, and there is a process by which I consult not only my leadership team, but also the law enforcement officers on the campus and also in the city. And they advise me at times when they feel it is necessary to alert and put specific language in that threat, determine on whether or not there's a credible threat in terms of bodily injury or harm to our students. This was very clear to us, and the advice from our police and everybody else that the alert that we put out was appropriate and efficient. Sometimes in situations like this, you have copycats. You have individuals who are looking for that kind of attention. And the last thing we want to do is to promote them or people like them who see this in the public. And that is the reason why I made the decision not to put the actual quote in my updates.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, we're adjourned already.
Right on.
Now, get
Jeff.
your box lunch. It's free on the house.